Most people aren't tired because they're working too hard. They're tired because their energy is leaking in all the wrong places. It's not the effort that drains you. It's the overthinking, the constant explaining, the endless need to defend your choices to people who were never meant to understand your path in the first place. And here's what nobody tells you. The most powerful people you'll ever meet are not the loudest in the room. They're the quietest. They don't chase arguments. They don't rush to explain themselves. They don't fight for attention. They've mastered something this noisy world has almost forgotten. The power of silence, of self-focus, of inner peace. And this wisdom isn't new. In fact, it's been around for over 2,500 years. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." But look at how most of us live today, constantly scrolling, endlessly comparing, always reacting. No wonder we feel lost, anxious, and disconnected from ourselves. Because every time you react to outside noise, every time you try to prove yourself, you step further away from your center. You hand over your peace for the price of approval. But what if there was another way? What if the real secret to a strong, peaceful life was not in doing more, but in doing less? In staying silent, staying grounded, and focusing deeply on your own journey, regardless of the chaos around you. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And if you stay with me till the very end of this video, I promise you'll walk away with a completely different view of what silence, focus, and true power actually look like in a noisy world. There's a reason Buddhist monks are known for their calm presence. It's not by accident. It's by daily practice, by inner mastery, and by learning when to speak, and when to simply smile and say nothing at all. So if you're someone who's been feeling drained, scattered, or lost in the noise of life, this video is for you. Every part of it builds on the last, so please don't skip anything. I want you to get the full picture because this could be the shift your mind has been waiting for. And hey, if you appreciate what we're doing here, sharing Buddhist wisdom and life-changing ideas completely free, there's one simple thing you can do to support this journey. Just hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to me and this growing community of mindful, peaceful souls walking this path together. There's a reason why no matter how much we try to stay productive, focused, or inspired, we still end up feeling overwhelmed. It's not because we're lazy or unmotivated. It's because we've forgotten where our attention is supposed to be. Inward. We live in a world that constantly pulls us outward, toward opinions, updates, news, likes, and comparisons. And in that constant pulling, we start to disconnect from ourselves. We begin to confuse other people's timelines with our own. We look at someone else's life and think, why am I not there yet? But Buddhism reminds us that true clarity only arises when we return to our center, when we stop measuring our life by the external and start listening to the quiet truth that lives inside of us. The Buddha taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. And if that's true, then allowing your mind to be constantly scattered, constantly chasing what's outside of you, only leads to one thing: a scattered, exhausted life. Think about it. When was the last time you truly sat with yourself, not distracted, not performing, not reacting, but simply still, aware, and focused inward? That's where peace lives. That's where self-understanding begins. But instead, we often allow ourselves to get swept away in the current of distraction. We check our phones before checking in with our own breath. We seek validation before checking if we even agree with ourselves. And this is why the first step in any real transformation is not adding more to your life. It's subtracting what's not serving you. Returning to your center isn't about isolation or turning your back on the world. It's about anchoring yourself so deeply in your own values, your own energy, that you stop getting pushed around by every passing emotion or opinion. In Buddhist practice, this is what mindfulness is all about. It's not just sitting on a cushion in silence, it's living your life with intention. It's remembering who you are when the world tries to make you forget. When you're centered, things change, not because the world becomes less chaotic, it doesn't, but because you are no longer moved by every wave. You become like the mountain, still, strong, grounded. Emotions may come, distractions may rise, people may still expect things from you, but you're no longer living on the surface of your life. You're rooted. This kind of inner peace isn't a luxury. It's not reserved for monks or people who have hours to meditate. It's available to everyone, every single day in the smallest of choices. To pause, to breathe, to listen, to reflect. The Buddha once said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." And that spiritual life doesn't have to be grand or complicated. It simply means living with presence, living with awareness, living in a way where you don't lose yourself in the noise. When you practice returning to your center, you begin to understand your triggers, your fears, your patterns. You see clearly what drains you and what fuels you. You begin to choose how to respond instead of being pulled into automatic reactions. There's something deeply misunderstood about silence in today's world. People often think that if you're quiet, it means you're weak, shy, or avoiding confrontation. But in reality, silence can be the loudest statement of power. It's not about running away from challenges. It's about rising above them. It's about choosing peace over proving a point. And that's something very few people know how to do, especially in a world that rewards noise, quick reactions, and constant validation. But if you look closely at the lives of wise people, especially those who follow the path of Buddha, you'll notice something. They speak less, but their words carry more weight. They react less, but their presence feels stronger. Buddhism teaches that silence is not emptiness. Silence is full of awareness, full of understanding, and full of power. The Buddha himself was known for his calm presence. He didn't engage in every argument. He didn't waste energy defending himself against every insult. He taught that truth doesn't need defending because truth always stands on its own. And sometimes the greatest wisdom is not in what you say, but in what you don't. Think about it. How often do we waste our precious energy explaining ourselves to people who have already made up their minds? How often do we rush to respond, only to regret the words we've said in anger or frustration? Every unnecessary word drains us just a little more. And slowly, without realizing it, we move away from our center, from that peaceful place inside where clarity lives. The Buddha once shared a very powerful teaching that still applies perfectly to our modern lives. He said, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" Now think of insults, judgments, and criticisms like those gifts. If you don't accept them, if you don't take them personally, they don't belong to you. They stay with the person who gave them. That's the wisdom of silence. You're not avoiding conflict because you're scared. You're staying silent because you refuse to let someone else control your peace. And this kind of silence isn't passive. It's active, it's intentional, it's powerful. It takes far more strength to stay quiet when provoked than to lash out in anger. Anyone can react. But it takes real inner mastery to pause, breathe, and let the storm pass without getting pulled into it. This is exactly why monks spend so much time in meditation and silence. It's not just about sitting still. It's about training the mind to stay calm, even when the world outside is chaotic. It's about learning that silence creates space. Space to think clearly, space to observe your emotions, and space to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. And silence doesn't only protect your peace, it also protects your energy. Every word you speak carries energy. Every argument drains energy. Every explanation given to the wrong person is like pouring water into a broken cup. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough. But when you practice silence, especially in moments that don't deserve your response, you conserve that energy for things that truly matter. Your growth, your peace, your purpose. Silence also teaches patience. It teaches you that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every comment needs a reply. Not every misunderstanding needs correction. Sometimes letting things be is the wisest choice you can make, and this is exactly how Buddhist wisdom turns silence into strength. It transforms you from someone who reacts to everything into someone who chooses carefully, speaks intentionally, and lives peacefully. There's something quietly painful about holding on to things that no longer serve you, a conversation you keep replaying, a judgment that stung deeper than it should have, or the need to prove your worth in someone else's story. It weighs on you in ways you can't always explain, not in words, but in that tightness in your chest, in your racing thoughts, in the way your peace feels just out of reach. And yet, we hold on. We cling. Not because we enjoy suffering, but because a part of us believes we have to. That somehow letting go means giving up or being weak. But the Buddha offered a radically different truth. You only lose what you cling to. Think about that for a moment. We're taught to hold on, to relationships, identities, past mistakes, future fears. But Buddhism gently reminds us that clinging is the root of suffering. The tighter your grip, the more pain you feel. Why? Because life is always moving, always changing. And when we try to freeze it, when we try to control how others perceive us, how things should have gone, we create tension within ourselves. We stop flowing with life and begin resisting it. This isn't about becoming emotionless or detached in a cold way. It's about becoming clear, detached like the sky is from the storms that pass through it. The sky doesn't fight the rain, doesn't argue with the thunder. It simply holds space for the weather to pass, unchanged at its core. You are the sky, the thoughts, opinions, and negativity that swirl around you. They're just temporary weather. But if you forget that, if you start believing that you are the storm, that you are the insult, the doubt, the fear, then you suffer. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to hold on to resentment? To keep retelling the same story of what someone said or did to you? Or how much energy you spend worrying about what people think? That exhaustion isn't from the event, it's from your attachment to it. And what's more, not every voice you hear deserves a space in your mind. Just because it's loud doesn't mean it's true. Just because someone criticized you doesn't mean they saw you clearly. Most people speak from their own wounds, not from wisdom. There's a beautiful story in Buddhist tradition about a monk who was insulted by a traveler. The monk simply smiled and didn't respond. Later, when someone asked why he didn't defend himself, he said, "If someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, to whom does it belong?" That's not passivity. That's powerful clarity. That's someone who knows their worth so deeply, they don't need to argue for it. They protect their peace, not their pride. So how do we begin to let go, not just in theory but in everyday life? First, we recognize the trigger. The moment someone's words or actions start pulling your energy, pause. Notice that shift. That awareness alone is powerful. Second, resist the urge to immediately react. Feel what you feel, but don't become it. Emotions are like waves. Let them rise, crest, and fall. Third, ask yourself a simple question. Does this deserve space in my mind? Because not everything does. And finally, visualize it like a cloud drifting through the sky. Watch it float away. You don't need to hold on. There's a quiet strength that most people never notice. It's not loud. It doesn't show off. It doesn't demand attention. But it's there, steady, grounded, unshakable. And that strength comes from one thing most people avoid: discipline. The funny thing is, when we hear the word discipline, our minds immediately jump to something rigid, boring, or harsh. We think of rules, restrictions, and forcing ourselves to do things we don't enjoy. But that's only because we've misunderstood what discipline really is. In Buddhist wisdom, discipline is not about punishment. It's about alignment. It's not about controlling life. It's about structuring your life in a way that protects your peace, sharpens your focus, and keeps you connected to your values, even when life gets messy. Think about it for a second. The Buddha didn't attain enlightenment by accident. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a moment of inspiration that fell from the sky. It was the result of years of committed practice, of sitting quietly under that Bodhi tree, of returning again and again to silence, breath, and stillness, even when his mind was restless, even when distractions tried to pull him away. That's discipline in its purest form, showing up for your highest self, especially when no one's watching. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your time, and your energy, discipline is the structure that holds you together. It's like the roots of a tree, hidden beneath the surface, invisible to the outside world, but absolutely essential for growth. Without roots, the tallest tree would fall with the slightest wind. But with roots, with depth, it can weather any storm. And the roots of your life are the small daily habits you commit to when it would be easier to give in to distraction. This is why discipline isn't restrictive, it's freeing. It creates stability in a world that is always changing. It gives you a home within yourself when everything outside feels uncertain. The Buddha often spoke about right effort, one of the key teachings in the Noble Eightfold Path. And right effort isn't about forcing or exhausting yourself. It's about steady, consistent action in the direction of wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. Not perfection, not pressure, just honest, mindful effort. Let me ask you, how many times have you waited to feel like it before doing something important for your growth? We've all been there, waiting for motivation, waiting for the perfect moment. But Buddhism teaches us a different lesson, that waiting for motivation is like waiting for the weather to be perfect every single day. It's unpredictable, it's unreliable. But discipline is your shelter when the weather isn't on your side. And here's the beautiful part. Discipline doesn't have to be huge or complicated. It's not about overhauling your entire life overnight. It's about small, sacred rituals that you return to daily. Maybe it's waking up a little earlier to sit in silence before the world wakes up. Maybe it's journaling your thoughts at the end of the day instead of scrolling endlessly. Maybe it's protecting your morning from technology and starting it with a simple mindful breath. The Buddha once said, "Little by little, a person becomes good, as a water pot is filled, drop by drop." That's exactly how discipline works. Quietly, patiently, consistently, one drop at a time. And over time, those tiny actions shape not only your day but your mind, your character, and your entire life. When you build discipline, you build trust with yourself. Every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, you're sending a message to your mind, I am reliable, I can count on myself. And there is no confidence more powerful than that. There's something deeply painful about feeling like you have to shrink yourself just to keep someone in your life. You stay quiet when they cross a line. You give more than you have just to avoid another argument. You forgive the same mistake over and over, hoping this time they'll change. But here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Some people don't want healing, they want control. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your entire life draining your energy trying to save someone who's committed to staying the same. Buddhism teaches us to offer compassion to all beings, yes, but never at the cost of our own well-being. The Buddha didn't teach martyrdom, he taught balance. And when a relationship starts to disturb your inner peace more than it supports your growth, that's your signal. That's the wisdom moment. Not everyone who walks into your life is meant to stay. Some people are lessons wrapped in connection. They teach us where our boundaries are, where our silence becomes self-betrayal, and where love must transform into letting go. The difficult part is that these people often wear familiar faces. Friends you've known for years, family members you're expected to tolerate no matter what, partners you've built entire futures around in your mind, and yet something feels off. Your body knows, your energy knows. You start to feel more anxious around them than at peace. You find yourself justifying behavior that deep down you know isn't right. Buddhism encourages us to pay attention to suffering, not to suppress it, but to understand it. If a connection repeatedly causes you emotional pain, confusion, or exhaustion, it is not your responsibility to carry it forward out of obligation. One of the most sacred acts of self-respect is walking away, not out of anger, but out of clarity. There's a well-known teaching in Buddhist circles that says, you cannot pour from an empty cup. If someone is constantly taking from you, your time, your patience, your peace, and never giving back, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a one-sided transaction. And self-compassion means choosing to protect your energy, even when it's uncomfortable. This doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole. The Buddha taught the importance of surrounding ourselves with what he called kalyana mittata, noble friends, people who encourage your spiritual growth, who reflect your values, and who inspire your better self. If someone is pulling you away from that path, it's okay, and often necessary, to step away. Sometimes we hold on to toxic relationships because we confuse familiarity with loyalty. We think that because we've shared history with someone, we owe them our future. But that's not how life works. A person can be part of your story without being part of your journey. Loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them close. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to release them with compassion. Wish them peace and walk your path. That space you create isn't emptiness. It's room for healing, clarity, and connection with people who match your growth, not resist it. You have to ask yourself, do I feel more like myself around this person, or less? Do I leave interactions feeling lighter or heavier? Do I spend more time recovering from the connection than being nurtured by it? These are not small questions. These are the questions that shape your future. Because if your circle costs you your peace, it's not a circle, it's a cage. And Buddhist practice is about liberation, freedom from suffering, from attachment, from illusions that keep you stuck. Walking away isn't the end, it's the beginning of returning to yourself. There's something profoundly underrated in the modern world, the quiet power of doing small things well. We're constantly pressured to think big, act fast, and chase results that look impressive to others. But in that chase, we forget where real change actually begins, not in dramatic decisions or huge leaps, but in the simple, invisible choices we make every single day. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They drift off course because their daily habits don't support the life they say they want. And without realizing it, they build a life that feels chaotic on the outside and hollow on the inside. Buddhism teaches us that transformation is not an event, it's a process of becoming. The Buddha never preached overnight success. He taught the middle way, a path of balanced, consistent effort, rooted in awareness. Every moment, every action, every thought becomes a building block for the kind of mind you're shaping. And the most powerful part? You're shaping it whether you're conscious of it or not. That's why habits matter, not because they're impressive, but because they're consistent. They shape who you become even when no one's watching. Think of a single drop of water falling on a stone. One drop does nothing, but if it falls in the same spot again and again over time, it carves through rock. That's the power of small habits. A few minutes of mindful breathing every morning, taking a deep breath instead of lashing out when you're irritated, choosing tea and quiet over endless scrolling. None of these seem groundbreaking in the moment, but over time they create a life with fewer regrets, more peace, and a stronger connection to who you really are. In Buddhist practice, this is known as right effort, part of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's the commitment to stay on the path, not because it's easy, but because it's sacred. Right effort means you keep showing up for your practice, even when it's inconvenient. It means you meditate even when you don't feel like it. You return to your breath even when your mind wants to wander. You stay kind when it would be easier to be cold. This kind of effort doesn't bring instant results, but it brings integrity, and that becomes your strength. Let's also talk about identity. One of the most powerful things you can do is build a reputation with yourself. Every time you follow through on a small habit, something as simple as waking up on time, journaling your thoughts, or keeping your space clean, you're telling your mind, I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who follows through. And over time, that belief reshapes everything. You stop needing external motivation because your discipline becomes part of who you are. If you've ever felt like your life is stuck, like you're putting in effort but not seeing results, don't give up. Look smaller. Go deeper. Ask yourself, what's one habit I can do today that aligns with my values? Then do it, even if it feels insignificant, because it's not about the habit itself. It's about the energy behind it. You're not just drinking tea or sitting in silence or stretching before bed. You're showing the universe and yourself that you are choosing peace, presence, and alignment. And that choice has a ripple effect. There's a strange thing about chaos. It never sends a warning before it arrives. One moment your day feels peaceful, manageable, even calm. And the next, it feels like life is spinning faster than you can keep up. Someone says something that stings. A message pops up that triggers worry. Plans fall apart. And before you even realize it, your mind is racing, your heart is restless, and your words are coming faster than your wisdom. We've all been there, swept away by the storm of reaction. But here's what's even more interesting. The chaos outside of us was never the real problem. The real struggle always begins within. Buddha understood this deeply. He didn't teach that life would be perfect or free from discomfort. He didn't promise that difficult people would disappear or that challenges would stop showing up. Instead, he taught us to master the only thing we truly can, our own mind. He said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." Meaning, it's not the external event that disturbs us. It's our internal reaction to that event. And in that wisdom lies the most powerful shift anyone can ever learn. To respond, not react. The truth is, reacting is easy. It's automatic. Someone offends you, and words are out of your mouth before you even think. A situation stresses you, and anxiety takes over your whole body. That's how most of us live, controlled by our emotions like puppets on strings. But Buddhism teaches us something far greater, that between what happens to you and how you respond, there is always a tiny space. And in that space lives your freedom, your peace, and your true power. Think about how powerful that is for a second. Life isn't about controlling every situation. It's about mastering that tiny pause before you act, that breath before you speak, that moment before you let your emotions drag you down a road you'll regret. This isn't weakness. This is wisdom in action. Buddha didn't become enlightened by fighting every battle. He became enlightened by mastering the battle within. And this is what mindfulness trains us to do, not to suppress feelings, not to pretend we don't care, but to observe what rises within us without becoming it, to feel anger but not be ruled by it, to feel fear but not run from it, to feel sadness but not drown in it. It's a practice of watching your emotions like clouds passing through the sky, noticing them, learning from them, but remembering always, you are the sky, not the storm. If you want to start building this inner calm, there are steps you can practice daily. The first is simple but deeply powerful. Start noticing your triggers, noticing what people or situations pull you out of peace. The second is learning to pause before reacting. Even a single breath can change everything. Inhale deeply. exhale slowly. Give your mind just enough space to return to clarity. The third step is asking yourself a question that monks often use. Will this reaction create peace or prolong pain? Let that question guide you. And lastly, practice this in small moments, not just big ones. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when your phone rings endlessly, when someone misunderstands you, every moment is a chance to build your response muscle. Mastery is not about never feeling anger, frustration, or stress. It's about training your mind not to hand over your peace so easily. The storm may rage outside, but the real victory is when you can stand rooted, calm, and cleared, untouched by the noise around you. There's a strange thing about life. Most people spend years trying to fix everything outside of them without ever looking at what's happening inside. They change jobs, they move cities, they change relationships. But somehow the same patterns follow them everywhere, the same triggers, the same reactions, the same feelings of being stuck or overwhelmed. And that's not an accident. It's because real change, the kind that actually frees you, doesn't start out there. It starts right here within your own mind. This is exactly what Buddha pointed to over and over again. He said, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. But to even know what you're becoming, you have to first understand how your mind operates. And for that, there's only one tool that works: self-inquiry. Asking yourself the kind of questions that most people avoid because the answers might be uncomfortable. But avoiding them doesn't make them disappear. It just keeps you trapped. Self-inquiry is like turning on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly, you see what's always been there. The fears, the wounds, the habits that control you without you even realizing it. And that's why it's so powerful, because you can't change what you refuse to face. Have you ever caught yourself reacting in a way that surprised even you? Maybe snapping at someone you love. Maybe procrastinating on something important. Or maybe falling into overthinking for hours over something that didn't even matter the next day. Those moments are not random. They are signals. Every reaction we have, every defense, every avoidance, it's like a little map pointing us back to something inside that wants our attention. But here's where Buddhism gives us the most beautiful gift. It teaches us that these patterns are not proof that we're broken. They're proof that we're human. Buddha never taught that the goal was to be perfect. The goal is to be aware, to see clearly, to watch your mind without judging it. And that's where true freedom lives, not in becoming flawless, but in becoming conscious. One of the simplest ways to practice self-inquiry is to start noticing your triggers, noticing without reacting. Buddha often spoke about the power of observing the mind like a calm lake reflects the sky. When a stone is thrown into the water, the ripples come, but with patience the surface becomes still again. That's exactly how the mind works. When you feel anger, jealousy, fear, those are just stones thrown into your mental lake. But instead of reacting immediately, sit with it. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? What am I really feeling underneath this reaction? Sometimes anger is just sadness in disguise. Sometimes overthinking is really fear of failure. Sometimes procrastination is fear of not being good enough. Self-inquiry helps you peel back those layers gently. It's not about blaming yourself, it's about understanding yourself. And the more you do this, the less power those reactions have over you. Another powerful tool is journaling, not in a perfect Instagram-worthy way, but raw, honest, messy if it has to be. Writing things down pulls them out of your mind and puts them where you can see them clearly. It helps you track patterns. It helps you notice what thoughts keep returning again and again. And in Buddhism, this practice of honest reflection is considered essential on the path to awakening. Because without awareness, we live like puppets, pulled around by unseen strings of old stories, fears, and conditioning. But with awareness, we become the observer, the watcher of thoughts, the master of our own inner world. And I'll be honest with you, this isn't easy work. It takes courage to sit in silence with yourself, to look within without flinching, but it is the most rewarding thing you can ever do for your peace, your growth, and your freedom. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that creeps into modern life, one that doesn't come from physical work, but from mental overload. It happens in those small moments that seem harmless at first. You wake up, and before you've even taken a deep breath, your fingers reach for your phone. Messages, notifications, news, social media. In less than 5 minutes, your mind has already been hijacked by the outside world. And without even realizing it, you've given away your most peaceful, powerful moments of the day, the very first thoughts of your morning, to everything and everyone except yourself. Buddhism teaches that the mind is a powerful servant but a terrible master, and nowhere is that more obvious than in today's digital world. We've created an environment that keeps our minds on a constant loop, always stimulated, always distracted, always scrolling for the next thing. And yet, what's deeply ironic is that the more connected we become digitally, the more disconnected we feel internally. Because peace, clarity, and focus don't come from consuming more information. They come from slowing down and creating space. The Buddha didn't live in a world of smartphones, but his wisdom cuts straight through time and technology. He taught that suffering comes not from the things themselves, but from our attachment to them. And in many ways, our relationship with technology today mirrors that attachment. We don't just use our devices, we cling to them. We check them compulsively, sometimes without purpose, often without awareness. And every time we do, we're reinforcing the habit of distraction over presence. But the real cost of this habit isn't just wasted time, it's a fragmented mind. It's harder to focus, harder to feel gratitude, harder to be still. We jump from app to app, video to video, post to post, and we wonder why we feel so mentally tired but spiritually empty. That's why in Buddhism, detachment isn't just about letting go of people or things. It's about letting go of habits that steal your peace. And digital detachment is one of the most powerful practices for the modern mind, because it's not about abandoning technology. It's about reclaiming your attention, your energy, and your life. One of the most beautiful practices I've seen from monks is the way they approach their mornings. There is no rush, no immediate reaching for outside noise. The first thoughts of their day are offered to presence, to gratitude, to mindfulness. They understand something most of us forget. The way you begin your day shapes the energy of everything that follows. So how do we bring this wisdom into our lives? It starts with small intentional choices. Maybe it's deciding that the first 5 minutes of your morning belong to you. Not to your phone, not to social media, but to silence, breath, or a simple cup of tea. Maybe it's creating moments throughout the day where you step away from the screen and return to your breath. Even a short walk without your phone can feel like a deep reset for your mind. Digital detachment is not about perfection, it's about awareness. It's about asking yourself, is this feeding my peace or fragmenting it? And being honest enough to change the habit if it's costing you more than it's giving. The Buddha once said, "Rule your mind or it will rule you." And in today's world, that wisdom has never been more important. If you don't consciously guide your attention, someone else will. Algorithms, ads, endless content, they all compete for your focus. But your focus is sacred. It builds your life. It builds your inner world. Most people wake up every day with one question quietly sitting in the back of their mind. Will everything work out the way I want? And without realizing it, this question shapes how they feel, how they act, and even how much peace they experience. It's almost like we've been trained to believe that we can only relax, only feel happy, only feel enough after things go exactly the way we planned. But life, as the Buddha so wisely reminded us, doesn't work like that. In fact, one of the core teachings of Buddhism is this: attachment is the root of suffering. And one of the strongest forms of attachment is not to things or people, but to outcomes. Think about it for a second. How many times have you given your absolute best to something, maybe a project, a relationship, a dream, and then felt completely crushed, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because the result wasn't what you expected? It's painful, isn't it? And it happens because somewhere deep down, we've attached our peace to things we can't fully control. We start believing that our worth is measured by results, that our happiness depends on success, that our effort only matters if it gives us the outcome we want. But Buddhist wisdom flips this thinking upside down. The Buddha didn't teach people to obsess over the fruits of their actions. Instead, he gently reminded his followers to focus on their own actions, their own intentions, their own effort, and then let go. Let go of the craving, let go of the control, let go of the idea that life owes you specific results in exchange for your work. One of the most beautiful metaphors from Buddhist teachings compares this mindset to a farmer planting seeds. The farmer can prepare the soil, plant the seed, water it daily, and care for it with love. But the farmer cannot control the weather. The farmer cannot rush the growth. The farmer cannot guarantee the outcome. And yet, the farmer continues to show up. That is real peace. That is real wisdom. Because here's the truth. Outcomes are never fully in your hands, but effort always is. And when you begin to shift your mindset from chasing results to honoring your daily effort, everything changes. Suddenly, you stop feeling like a victim of life's uncertainty. You stop feeling powerless when things don't go your way. And most importantly, you begin to find joy in the process instead of waiting endlessly for the result. This teaching is so powerful because it doesn't ask you to give up on your dreams. It doesn't say you should stop working hard or stop caring. It simply asks you to trust life a little more. To understand that sometimes what feels like a setback is actually a redirection. Sometimes what feels like failure is actually growth happening underground, like roots quietly getting stronger before anything blooms above the surface. The Buddha taught that craving, especially for things outside our control, creates restlessness in the heart. It keeps us in a loop of stress, frustration, and disappointment. But when you do your best, release your attachment and trust the natural flow of life, something magical happens. You make space for peace. You give life permission to surprise you. And often, what life gives you is better, deeper, and more meaningful than what you were clinging to in the first place. And maybe that's the most peaceful kind of power a person can have. To give their very best, to walk their path with honesty and love, and then to simply let go, trusting that what is meant for them will never miss them, and what is not meant for them will quietly fall away. Life isn't asking you to control everything. Life is asking you to trust, to flow, and to grow. Thank you so much for being part of Buddhist Journey with me and for choosing peace over pressure. If this message touched your heart, there's another video waiting for you right here on the screen. A lesson I think your soul will truly appreciate. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep returning to your center. I'll see you there.